One, two, three.
The following is a Laura Flanders Show audio exclusive.
A few weeks back, we talked on this program to Texans about making positive change in all sorts of ways that we're typically told are impossible. Today, we take our investigation to Washington, D.C. to speak with one man who, to my mind, epitomizes the practice of doing what needs to be done against the odds. At a time when many Americans have grown frustrated with Congress, cynical about the courts, and afraid that our democracy has been hijacked by demagogues and big money, Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, has been out there taking on politics' most difficult challenges in a difficult place during one of the hardest times in his personal life. He's a constitutional scholar as well as a longtime professor, and in the hours after the assault on the Capitol, it was he who was chosen to head up the second impeachment investigation of Donald Trump. He currently serves on the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection, which is getting ready to hold hearings in public this June. And he's the author of Unthinkable: Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy, a memoir of the 45 days at the start of 2021 in which he lost his son, Tommy, to suicide, lived through the violent insurrection in our nation's capital, and led the impeachment effort.
Congressman Raskin, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Not so long ago, I was talking with right-wing watchdog and researcher Lisa Graves, who described U.S. democracy as hanging by a thread. And I thought I'd start by asking you, do you agree?
Well, in one sense, yes, because there are people who have predatory designs on us. Trump and his coterie, his entourage and his movement are determined to rule or ruin. Either they're going to control the government and the state apparatus for their own private money-making purposes and ideological purposes, or they're going to ruin our opportunity to get anything done. So that puts us in a serious danger zone. On the other hand, I do tell people the vast majority of Americans are on our side. Hillary beat him by more than 3 million votes. Joe Biden beat him by 7.5 million votes. The young people are coming on the side of democracy. The new Americans are coming on the side of democracy. And so they've got a bag of tricks over there with the voter suppression, the electoral college, the gerrymandering of our congressional districts, the packing of the courts, right-wing judicial activism. But they need them because anything approximating real democracy would put them out of business.
We're a nonpartisan program, as you can imagine, on a nonpartisan network, as you know, and therefore I think of democracy as a fairly sort of nonpartisan affair. And I think that there are people who vote all sorts of ways, who care about the things that you care about. How should they, or how do you invite them to look at the hearings that are about to kick off? What's your plan for those January 6th hearings? And how will you deal with the sort of urgency of getting things done that are both public and consequential, given if the Democrats lose the majority in the midterms, the whole thing will get shut down?
Well, we've got a strong bipartisan select committee examining the events of January 6th, the causes behind it, and then what we need to do moving forward to fortify democratic institutions against future coups and insurrections and so on. So it's precisely as you say. We are in a research, fact-finding, investigative, educational mode, and we're trying to speak to the whole country. And it's complex, of course, because political parties are by necessity active participants in democracy, but we are trying to speak across political parties to the entire country about the necessity of defending democratic process, because what we saw on January 6th was an attempt to overthrow the constitutional order and the regular process for electing president.
Will we find out things we didn't know already?
Very much so. I think the vast majority of things people are going to hear will be for the very first time. And even for people who understand the nature of the danger, it's a completely different thing when you actually get the names and the places and the details of what happened, and you see how close we were. I mean, at several points, it came down to the heroism and valor of particular officers. And you know that 150 of our officers ended up brutalized, wounded, injured, hospitalized with concussions, traumatic brain injuries, broken arms, legs, heart attacks, strokes, and so on. We're going to tell the whole story of how that happened. But also Mike Pence, by refusing to cave into Donald Trump's designs, he also prevented us from lapsing into an authoritarian form of government and martial law and perhaps civil war. So there were a number of moments when we could have lost it all, and we want people to see precisely what happened and how close we came.
You said it's going to blow the roof off the house.
Well, if people are not completely immune and deadened to the reality of things because of 4 years of Donald Trump's lies and propaganda and sinister conspiracy theories, yeah, this is the worst presidential political offense against the Union in American history. Nothing else comes close to it.
And just to go back to that question about consequences, I mean, you are on a very short timeline to get something actually done. Why are we waiting so long for the Justice Department? Will you subpoena Donald Trump? I mean, I'm channeling all the questions that have been thrown at me since I mentioned to my colleagues and friends that I was going to be talking with you.
Yeah, well, we have a great sense of urgency about what we're doing. And we've moved in record time when you look at other major committees or commissions like the 9/11 Commission and others that have examined traumatic events in our history. We're actually moving at lightning speed. But I know that there's great frustration, which we all share, about the seeming impunity of Donald Trump and his immediate coterie of aides. On the other hand, the DOJ has brought more than 800 prosecutions against participants in the insurrection. That investigation dwarfs anything that the Department of Justice has done in American history. Nothing comes close to it. And of course, nothing comes close to the kind of violence leveled against the Capitol and against the Congress that we saw on January 6th. But I know people are eager to see, what the DOJ will do at the very top level of the seditious conspiracies that were arrayed against us. And we are eager too. But our goal as a select committee is to get the truth to the people so we can make reasonable and urgent decisions about what we need to do to protect ourselves going forward. And some of that has to do with shatterproof glass at different levels of the Capitol. Some of it has to do with reform of the Electoral Count Act and the Insurrection Act. And to my mind, we need to secure the right to vote, and we need to secure the counting of votes against partisan manipulation and distortion, which is really what we're up against in a lot of parts of the country right now.
I mean, you've told the story many times, and I don't want you to have to go back there, but it is important constantly for me to remember that when we say attacks on democracy for you and your fellows in the House and in the Congress, it was not metaphorical. And in fact, you've made the point in our conversations before that many of those Capitol guards and others who were injured were disproportionately people of color. I mean, this was a real life and death situation for you and your colleagues.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, those police officers saved our lives, and not just the lives of the partisans of democracy, but the lives of, putatively at least, the lives of people who were on the side of the insurrection and the coup. Now, it may have been that they wouldn't have been killed had it come to that. I don't know the answer to it, but certainly there was a lot of fear and terror on their side of the aisle as well as on our side of the aisle.
Were you afraid?
This was as close to fascism as I ever want to see our country come to, and we need to turn it around very quickly. The political scientists tell you that the key indicator of a successful coup is a recently failed coup, where the coup plotters can essentially diagram the deficiencies and the weaknesses in the incumbent regime. And there are those who are adamant that Trump will take power under any circumstances in 2024. And we have got to do whatever we can to fortify and insulate the electoral system.
So if our democracy is still kicking at this moment. Do we do enough with it is one of the questions I have for you. I mean, gerrymandering has brought us to a point where many of us live in fairly homogenous districts. You represent a blue district where I would imagine you barely even have to campaign. Could we be doing more with the democracy that we still have?
Well, definitely, yes. I mean, for one thing, the Senate could be doing with the democracy what the House is doing with it. I mean, we passed the For the People Act to protect early voting and weekend voting and mail-in balloting, which are all under attack by state legislatures across the country with just dozens and dozens of voter suppression schemes. But the Senate is completely hamstrung by the filibuster. I mean, we've got to lower prescription drug prices by giving the government the power in Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices, which is a power the government's got in the Medicaid program. It's got in the VA program. Again, we passed it in the House, but it's sitting over there in the Senate. We need to act on climate change, which is bearing down upon us, which is a nightmare that is very much on the minds of young people in the country, but obviously affects everybody. So we got to be doing more with the government, but also, as you suggest, we got to be doing more with our politics. My district actually has been with a blue county, a red county, Carroll County, purple county, which is Frederick County, and then Montgomery is my home county. It has, because of judicial decisions now, it's been made much more homogenous and much more democratic. So just because you can make something look more compact doesn't mean you make it more competitive. And I think there's a lot of confusion about gerrymandering, and we haven't even really agreed upon a definition for it. But what we fought for in the For the People Act was movement to independent redistricting panels, take the politicians out of it. And then I favor multi-member districts where you get real proportional representation, the kind that other democratic countries have figured out. But in terms of my own campaign, I spend no money on TV, radio, consultants, pollsters. It all goes into Democracy Summer, which is our educational summer project for high school kids and college kids to get involved in the defense of democracy and democratic values. And it will be going across the country this summer. We should have more than 1,000 Democracy Summer Fellows working with us. So yeah, I'm with you on this. On my side of the aisle, the people representing blue districts should not just sit back and be content with re-election. We need to mobilize the idealism and the energy within our own districts to help people in neighboring districts and in swing districts across the country. I think the Supreme Court's outrageous and impending destruction of the constitutional right to privacy gives us the opportunity to mobilize people to go vote like we've never voted before.
So people can find out probably more about Democracy Summer. It sounds like the sort of thing that if you are a dissenting Republican out there, you might want to organize your local people in the similar kind of way. I don't know, just an idea. Coming back to you, Congressman, you mentioned the Supreme Court. We're speaking in the immediate wake of the leak of the Alito draft of the decision in the abortion case that you mentioned, Dobbs v. Virginia Women's Health. Is that what it is?
It's Mississippi.
Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health. Is there a route to codifying Roe? I mean, to putting it in law so that we wouldn't constantly be debating this? And what do you say to people that say Democrats have never really wanted to come through on that because they need the whistle to get their election, to get their voters out?
Well, we've already done it in the House of Representatives, Laura. We passed the Women's Health Protection Act, which is a codification of Roe, and making sure that women continue to have the right with their physicians to make decisions as to, procreative and reproductive autonomy. So we've done it in the House. Again, this is something that is sitting in the Senate. Obviously, we foresaw what was coming with the Supreme Court, with the Roberts Court and the war on Roe and Casey. It still was astonishing for us to see it in writing, but we, of course, predicted it many months ago, and we did codify Roe versus Wade. So we've got to figure out how to crack the very tough nut of the U.S. Senate, because the filibuster basically gives not just 40 senators, but one senator the right to put a hold on legislation and tie it up indefinitely. So the world's greatest deliberative body has become the world's least deliberative body.
And why has it been so hard to get even every Democrat to support doing away with the filibuster in the Senate?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, the problem is that our so-called majority in the Senate is a 50-50 majority. It's only a majority because we can call in Vice President Harris to break the tie if we have all 50 Democratic senators together. But if one defects, like, Senator Manchin or Senator Sinema, if they decide to take a walk on us, then we no longer have the ability to create the 50-50 tie to be broken. So we've got FDR-style ambitions to bring progressive change and equality and freedom and justice to everybody in America, but we just don't have FDR-style majorities. When Roosevelt was in power, he had dozens of more representatives and 25 or 30 more senators than the Republicans did, and we're trying to, deal with the crises of our time with these extremely slender majorities.
FDR also had stinging slogans like, only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And some people say that we've got a messaging, or that Democrats have a messaging problem. Ralph Nader was complaining the other day, the longtime consumer advocate and independent candidate for president. He wrote, with its record-setting campaign fundraising, the Democratic Party can't seem to figure out how to go on the offensive. GOP fictions have left the Democrat apparatchiks, as he calls them, tongue-tied. They can neither come up with easily pummeling rebuttals nor even authentic boasting. How hard is it to boast about the $300 a month to over 60 million children cut off by the GOP? Does he have a point? I mean, what is the message of the Democrats this season?
Well, yeah, sure, he's got a point, and I hear this wherever I go, that, we don't have a problem with our politics or the policies we've been advancing. We got a problem with the messaging. So, yeah, let's consider the contest on. I mean, I'm out there telling all the young people, here's my message. Everything that you need to know about voting is everything you need to know about driving. If you want to go forward, you put it in D. If you want to go backwards, you put it in R. How's that for a message? And everything flows out of that. If we want to make progress, you got to be on the side of democracy, which is the Democratic Party, because forgive my partisanship here, but I am an elected partisan figure. And I would just say, if, whatever our flaws, whatever our imperfections in messaging or anything else, we are the party of democracy, and we are standing up to defend the Constitution and our democratic arrangements in the country. And we're not going to get anything done if we go down the road of the Oath Keepers and the Three Percenters and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz and so on. We're not. I mean, that is a party of that's been taken over for nihilism and destruction of democratic purposes.
Now, you are absolutely allowed to be partisan. I just have to keep the ship afloat here, of a kind of sense of we do have a nation out there besides our kind of a partisan, arcade mirror reflection that is usually what we get in our media.
And I agree with that completely. If I could say a word about that, Laura, I'd love to. Which is, look, there's a lot of double speak about partisanship, and I mean, nothing is more characteristic of any politician of any party than to spend the day with their caucus deciding on their party agenda and then go out on the floor and denounce partisanship. And I would like to have a little more intellectual honesty and realism about it. Okay, partisanship and partisan combat is built into a democratic society. You could view it as the oxygen of democratic society. It is a reflection of our First Amendment that we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of thought. There's an easy way to get rid of partisanship if that's what you don't like, which is move to a one-party state. And if you move to an authoritarian government, there won't be partisanship because the partisans will be in jail, and then everybody else will just be for the dictator. So political parties, I give 2 cheers for political parties because they help us to articulate problems and solutions, agendas, educate the public, mobilize the voters, create a contrast, and then once we're in, move for an agenda. But I only say 2 cheers because I think those of us who aspire and attain to public office have got to remember the day after the election's over, we've been fighting like cats and dogs, but once we've been elected, Remember what a party is. It comes from the French word parti, which means a part. Our party is just part of the whole, and we have to do what we can to speak for the whole. And, we know how to do that. If you come to my district office in beautiful Rockville, Maryland, and you have a problem with Social Security or Medicare or VA benefits, we will serve you, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or Green or Independent. We never ask about your political party affiliation, so we know how to do it. The problem is that oftentimes when parties get into a minority posture and they're shrinking, then they will try to turn everything partisan and just try to obstruct. And I'm afraid that that's where we are now.
The whole point of the country was supposed to be many voices, not one king, not one, and aristocracy. That's kind of the whole idea.
Yes.
So I'm with you on the lifeblood of debate and discussion and partisanship. And I would say many cheers. Let's have many parties. Let's come back, though, to what people can do. There's a connection I'd love you to draw between what you are up against in Washington and what people around the country are seeing in their school boards, at their libraries, even at their hospitals, around healthcare. What's that connection as you see it, and what is in people's hands to do in a time like this around the country?
Well, people are dealing with practical problems. So if you have diabetes, as millions of people do in the country, and your insulin is costing you $100 or $150 a month or more, $200 or $250 a month, depending on what kind and how much you have to use and so on. That's a problem that you could expect your government to deal with. I mean, our people are spending 5 or 10 times more than people in other countries simply because our government can't negotiate with big pharma to regulate those prices. And we're the only country on earth which can't. And why is that? Well, there was a guy named Billy Towson, who was a congressman, who slipped that in. And then after he left Congress the next year, became, what do you know, the president of Big Pharma. All right, there's a depressing Washington tale for you. But we have legislation, which we've passed on the House side, that will allow people to get their insulin for no more than $30 a month. But it's wrapped up with the Senate and with the implacable opposition of the other party, which to my mind is, lock, stock, and barrel in the thrall of Big Pharma.
And as a constitutional scholar, what's the connection as you see it between the attacks on our democracy, the insurrection, and so on, and what we're seeing in terms of the fights over the curriculum, library books, and so on?
Well, what we're going to have is a clash between two kinds of populism, and one is going to be right-wing authoritarian populism, which picks out scapegoats like Mexican rapists or critical race theory or LGBTQ groomers, or we're going to have a progressive populism that is focused on the real life situation of diabetics and people who need prescription drugs. And we are going to focus on the stranglehold that big money has over Washington and over a lot of politicians. So, I view all of those issues of the week that they come up with, critical race theory or groomers or what have you, as just attempts to distract people. It's an attempt to bedazzle people, but it's meaningless. But it is more dangerous than that because they're often trying to inflame racial, ethnic, religious feelings. And that is the playbook of right-wing populism all over the earth right now.
Well, let's talk about the earth for just a little bit. I know we have to let you go soon, but we're seeing a war in Europe, and a war that has been fueled by exactly the kind of demagoguery and populism that you mentioned on the Russian side specifically. In the wake of the need, in face of the need, we're seeing massive military dedications, procurements, and contracts. Or we're seeing a lot of money being spent on military provisions for the Ukrainians. 33 billion in the last few days. It's approaching 50 billion in the last 2 months. Most of that going directly to military operations. And then at home, we still have this so-called defense budget that's eating up 53 cents of every dollar. We just came, and last time I spoke to you, I had just come from doing a story about how a lot of that military contractor money trickles down to privatized military facilities and training places that we were able to show were places where people that came to the Capitol had trained. Are we ever going to see any attention to this, or does the urgent need in Ukraine sort of, to use your word, bedazzle us from a bigger agenda of shrinking our military spending?
Well, I mean, you ask an essential question because, Putin invaded Ukraine and killed several thousand civilians, and they're murdering children and raping women and killing them and leaving them in the street. And democracy's under siege there, and we need to be on their side, and we need to be surging and rushing military assistance to them to defend themselves and protect themselves against Putin's invasion. At the same time, we know that so much of the money that has been spent in our military industrial complex, as President Eisenhower called it, has been siphoned off for corruption and graft and bribery and waste. It's a money-making operation for a lot of people. So we have to, on the one hand, rush aid to our allies in the Ukraine, and at the same time, do the very tough work of making sure that money is not being ripped off for these other purposes and turned against the American people in different ways, as you suggest. I mean, it was the fear of the founders of a standing army that it would end up endangering the liberty of the people. So that fear has got to remain in a liberal democracy, at the same time that we're defending liberal democracies against autocrats and dictators abroad.
Well, I want to come back to your experience in the last few months. But before I do, just quickly, we're constantly told to write to our congressperson. And we're also told to be out in the streets demonstrating if we don't like what's happening. Do either of those things actually make a difference? Do you see anyone paying attention to demonstrations outside? I've been in lots of them, so I'm all for it. But I've always wondered, do people inside actually even hear the screams and yells?
Well, certainly they do. First of all, on the letters, I mean, I read as many letters and emails and notes as I can to find out what's on people's minds, and I get good ideas from them. And, even members who don't make a habit of trying to read them will get a tabulation of, well, where are my people on women's reproductive autonomy? Are they basically with Alito and the right wingers on the court, or are they with Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey? So I think that does make a big difference. And I think the demonstrations are huge for manifesting the depth of people's passions and sentiments. And, that's worked on different sides of different questions in our history. So, I'm not somebody who would ever understate the importance of First Amendment action and First Amendment activity. I mean, I think we need to be as creative as possible and as imaginative as possible. And that, of course, is the opposite of what we saw on January 6th, because nothing is less creative or less imaginative than just violence and beating the hell out of police officers, which is now the MO of America's violent right-wing street forces.
Well, you brought us back to January 6th, which, as people may know by now, was the day after you buried your beloved son, Tommy, who you lost to suicide. Your book, Unthinkable, Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of Democracy, puts trauma first. And I want to ask you a little bit about how you look after yourself and how your family are coping. And I happened to notice that right behind you was a harp. So I have this illusion now of you sitting around for chamber music concerts and listening to harp playing. Is that how you deal with trauma?
That harp belongs to our daughter Tabitha, and I wish she would come around a little bit more and play that harp. We just returned actually from Boston, where we went to Harvard Law School, where Tommy's professors and classmates had a memorial service for him yesterday. So we're still very much, in the grieving and mourning and processing dimension of this. I suppose we always will be. We miss Tommy very sharply every day, but he keeps me going strong because he had much greater ambitions for democracy and what it could do, not fewer ambitions. And I know that he would want us out there fighting every step along the way to defend the democracy we have and to expand it and to grow it and to build people's voting rights and build people's ability to be represented, and then to use government as an instrument for the common good.
Representative Jamie Raskin, I can't think of anyone who better expresses the slogan of this program. We say this is the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Thank you for being out there doing it and inspiring so many and keeping alive the memory of Tommy, who certainly inspired your family and others. Thank you so much for being with us.
And thank you for having me, Laura. It was great, and keep up your awesome work.